Welcome to the Boosted Volunteer Podcast. We share the stories of dedicated Booster Club volunteers and the tools and strategies they use to run successful booster clubs. We also have sought-out experts on fundraising, volunteer management, and running nonprofits to share best practices. Hosted by Robin Eissler and Elgin Eissler, you won't want to miss these great episodes that will help you run your booster club like a champ.
Hi, boosters. Welcome back to the Boosted Volunteer. I'm Robin Eissler, your host and founder of Booster Hub, the software platform for booster clubs. Today, we're going to be talking about booster club insurance. Elgin Allen Jr. is the founder and CEO of AIM, Association Insurance Management in Dallas, Texas, and Jamie Fagan is AIM's president, leading daily operations. AIM was founded in 1989 and is a specialty insurance company for PTOs, PTAs, and booster clubs. They currently cover more than 22,000 parent groups in all 50 states. They focus on real issues like what might happen in the concession stand and equipment that's purchased by booster clubs, and then also things like general liability, embezzlement, directors and officers insurance. I look forward to diving in with you guys today and talking about booster club insurance. So, Elgin, AIM's whole story starts with an injured child on new playground equipment and a parent group that got held liable for it. Take us back to that moment. How did one incident turn into a company that now protects more than 22,000 groups, including thousands of booster clubs?
Yeah, that did happen. And what it really did was it heightened the awareness of liability for all school groups, including booster clubs. They didn't really understand the liability they have when it was very popular, not so popular now because we steer groups away from it, but it was really popular for groups to take their fundraising money, buy playground equipment, and then donate it to a school. And so as a result of them purchasing it and donating it, then they were responsible for injuries. And so again, that heightened the awareness and created a need for insurance all around the country.
That, I think, in most cases, everyone just assumes that the school insurance covers all of that. And still, to this day, that's what most people assume.
Yeah. When there's a lawsuit, everybody gets dragged into it, including the school. And so the school's coverage covers the school, but it doesn't cover the school organizations like a booster club. So very important for the booster club to have their own insurance.
Jamie, you lead the day-to-day operations at AIM. What drew you into this world of booster clubs and school volunteers? It's kind of a unique corner of the industry.
Yeah. So, that AIM is family owned. Elgin is actually my father. And we actually only support educational nonprofits. So this is all we do. We're not selling homeowners or auto insurance or anything like that. So we just do educational support organizations like booster clubs. It's really rewarding. And so I've enjoyed doing that and got into it because Elgin was my father, and it's wonderful.
I used to be in business with my dad for a long time. In my previous life, when I was in aviation before booster clubs, my dad and I worked together for about 30 years. So I can appreciate that. It's great to work with family.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, let's jump right to the question every booster, treasurer, volunteer asks. We're just a booster club. Who would ever sue us? What do you tell them?
Yes, we get that question a lot. And you would be surprised how many organizations ask us this question. So what we say is, you are running a small business and you're doing with volunteers, which is even more impressive. And so you have money, you are having events, so your money could be stolen. You could be held liable if someone breaks their leg on a whatever event you might be doing, whether it's a concession or some type of fundraising. I know a bounce house or some other type of event, not necessarily that every booster does that, but you can be held liable. So there are lots of people who are attending your events who will hold you liable. And we're getting into even being a more litigious society where everybody's looking for a way to hold somebody else responsible for something that happened. So we see claims every day where someone just tripped over something in a parking lot that had really nothing to do with the booster, but it was a booster club event. And so they thought, well, why not try to see if the medical bills can be paid for by the booster, because it was technically their event and I fell in the parking lot at their event. So
that's crazy. What exactly should a booster club ask their school district to find out what is and isn't covered and who needs to be covered where? What's the big picture? Like, who should they be working with? What are the questions they should be asking?
Yeah. So this is kind of one of the things that we tell people often because there's this kind of assumption that, well, probably the school is going to cover it. So we don't really need to worry about that. And I think nobody really wants to do the work of finding out if that's actually true. They just kind of want to fall back on that in hopes that it is. It's becoming less and less true. More schools and districts are having risk management companies come in and figure out how to not be responsible for those types of events, whether it's a booster or a PTA or some other type of organization. So we would say you should create a list of your activities. So everything you're going to do, you're going to have a concession stand, you're planning to do this, you're going to have a few meetings on campus, make a list, give it to the school, the athletic director, whoever it is, and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Can you confirm that the school is going to cover us for these events? And 9.9 times out of 10, we find that there's something the school comes back and says, no, we really don't want to do that. And in all cases, they're not going to cover your money. So if you're collecting funds in a concession stand, the school isn't going to cover that.
Yeah,
So,
they're just going to be the liability side.
right.
So let's talk about the different types of coverage. So there's liability, embezzlement, directors and officers, property. Kind of explain each one of those, what they cover, why you need them, why it's good for a nonprofit to have them.
Yes. And at the risk of overcomplicating it with insurance jargon, we basically offer four main types of coverages. And I realize this is probably a lot for most booster clubs, but the number one is general liability. And this is covering your events and property damage, basically. So you have a concession and something catches on fire and damages somebody else's property, or it catches on fire and there's an injury to someone. It's basically, sometimes we just call it event coverage to kind of cement that into our leaders' brains of like, if you're having events, even if it's just meetings, things like this, you need general liability. So that's kind of how we describe it. I'm going to mention our crime or fidelity bond coverage second, only because this is our number one claim. And this is basically theft of funds. So if you are collecting funds, you need checks and balances to make sure the funds are being properly spent, recorded, no one's stealing from you, embezzling this money. It's all the money is going where you think it's going. And if it's not, that's where this fidelity bond policy comes in. And the two remaining policies, one is directors and officers. So this basically just covers the decisions that your directors, your board members, your committee makes on behalf of your organization. So you decide that you're going to have this certain concession, you're only going to sell popcorn and Cokes, and then you're going to use that money in this certain way. So your organization is making all of those decisions to decide how the event's going to be run, how the money will be used, those types of things. And somebody might come in and say that they don't agree with those decisions you made on behalf of the organization and try to sue you saying that you mismanaged it in some way. And then the final type of coverage is property. And this is really just physical property that your booster has. So whether it's band equipment, whether it's popcorn machines and things that you might have for running your concession, a trailer where you store some of your items, maybe even if you do some type of sales for spiritware or something like that. If you hold any type of real property in any amount, we would recommend that you do property coverage. And just to kind of give you an idea, I know that sounds like a lot. There's four coverages, but on average, an organization spends around $330, $350 for this combination of coverages with us annually.
Yeah, I know back when I was a booster, I found that we were doing about $50,000 a year, and it just made sense to spend a couple $100 and have coverage for all of the things to make sure that we were covered. One on property, let's dive into that just a little bit. A lot of the bands have semi-trailers that they use to pull their equipment in. How does that coverage work? I know I see a lot of discussions like, is that covered by the school or did the person driving it, or have you seen any of those policies?
Yes. And this is something Elgin and I were talking about this not too long ago. trailers are covered under the property coverage and all of the contents of those trailers. And I think most of our boosters are pretty well versed in knowing that they need the property coverage for these things. There is the liability aspect of pulling those trailers and who you have behind the wheel. And that's definitely, sometimes we have boosters that hire a Penske truck. They don't actually own their own trailer. And so the scenarios can be a little bit varied, but we really try to encourage units to be very careful about the driving of the trailers and who they're putting behind the wheel. You want it to be an experienced person, ideally the same person every time and not just a different volunteer.
Yeah, I think that's something that probably would be good if people have concerns or questions. That's one you probably need to dive into on each individual case. They're all a little bit different. So booster officers, can they be personally liable if a treasurer misspends or president makes a really bad decision? Can somebody come after them personally? Have you seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. We talk to booster clubs all over the country, and most of the time they call us and want to know why they need insurance. And so we can go through a whole list of things about why they need it. But when we say one of the main reasons you need it is if there's something happens and there's a lawsuit, then you personally can be held liable. So your equity in your home, your savings, your 401k, all those things can be subject to a lawsuit. And we really get their attention when we tell them that, because they had no idea. They think if there's a lawsuit, that's the
They just
booster
raise
club's
their
problem.
hand, right?
That's
They
not
just
my,
raise their
yeah,
hand.
that's not my problem. It's not just the officers. If you're having an event and you have volunteers, that liability can fall on volunteers' assets. So it's very important to have insurance to not only protect the booster club, but protect the officers and all of their members and volunteers.
I hear a lot about embezzlement or fraud or theft in booster clubs, and still organizations that handle a lot of cash. Still common. I try to talk people out of it for a lot of different reasons. How common is it, and what does your theft coverage or embezzlement coverage do? Like, wild guess, like how many of those claims do you see in a year? Give us some feedback on that.
Yeah. So as I said, embezzlement is the number one claim. And we do a variety of webinars and try to really get out there. And that's one of the questions I always ask, especially if I'm doing something live. I'll ask everybody in the room, can anybody guess what the number one claim is? And nobody ever says embezzlement. But yes, it is the number one claim. And we talk a little bit about how this happens. You know, it's not always malicious. Often it is, but sometimes it's just somebody's a little bit down on their luck and they borrow, quote unquote, from the booster club with the idea that they're going to pay it back and then don't ever have the ability to do so. And there's no checks and balances in place. And then over some period of time, they've been paying their bills for could be 12 months out of the booster club account. And because it's gone unchecked, it was just really easy to do. And maybe they're not a bad person, but here they are. And it's your booster club's money. So yes, it happens a ton. One of the things that we really recommend is that one, you always have someone who is not a check signer signing off on your bank statements every single month. And that's actually under our fidelity bond policy, we require it. When we plaster it everywhere saying this is a requirement of the policy, you have to have someone looking at your bank statements that's not a signer every single month and just saying, yep, they've been reviewed. We've looked at all the ins and the outs of the flow of money and it's approved. And then the other one is doing an annual audit. And this doesn't have to be necessarily done by a CPA, but ultimately you want to review all the ins and outs of those financials over the course of a year. And we see a lot of things that get caught this way. So we really recommend both of those things. And if your money does disappear, we hope you have insurance and you can make a claim. And I don't know how many embezzlement claims we see a year, but it's quite a lot, across 24,000 organizations. We see quite a lot. And we just hope that when we do see one, they're taking some type of proper measures to catch these things.
We did a survey recently of school district officials and asked how many had fraud or embezzlement in their programs. And it was 22% either had fraud or had suspected fraud within the past 2 years, which was just shocking to me, like a huge number, crazy high.
Huge.
Yeah. Well, we do a lot of those checks and balances in Booster Hub. That's our claim to fame. We like to show the financials to a big group of people so everyone can see them and everyone can see what's happening. Not everyone, but at least the whole board. So there's a lot of checks and balances in there. So you're speaking to the choir here at Booster Hub.
Yeah. Well, hey, all of these problems are how your need came about, right? What you guys
Yep.
are doing is amazing.
Exactly. So boosters run everything from concession stands to casino nights, golf tournaments, banquets. What are the events that when you hear them, you're like, oh boy, this is a high risk event or something you may not even be able to cover, anything like that?
Gosh, Elgin, I don't know if you have any that come to mind, but I don't think boosters probably do a lot of bounce houses. That's a big one that we see among like parent teacher type groups. But a lot of times, any of our athletic activities are a little more high risk usually. Sometimes we see raffles that get a little more, you wouldn't think raffles, but people raffle off alcohol and all types of things like that, maybe not appropriate or could cause some different types of liability. One of the other things I like to impress upon people is, if you have a tailgate where you hire food trucks or different types of vendors. I mean, I don't know how common that is, but if you have other vendors that are coming into one of your events, you really want to be careful about them having insurance. We see different groups hiring vendors that don't have insurance to be part of their event. And then if something catches on fire or, ultimately the booster is being held liable. So those are the ones that come to mind for me. Elgin, I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, and I think you covered it pretty well.
Yeah, that's definitely, you don't even think about that. Like you just assume, oh, I'm going to have a vendor in. I'm sure they're going to be good. But if we were going to go anywhere, they'd want a certificate of insurance or something on file first. So that's a good point.
We're seeing an increase of people who want to run fireworks stands. So,
No
booster
liability
clubs.
in that at all. I don't know where.
Yeah, we have these big fireworks companies, and it's big, especially we're in Texas. You see it a lot in Texas, although it's coming up in California, which, they're so dry. Like, come on. But basically, the organizations are just selling the fireworks and taking a portion of the profits. But this is starting to become a more frequent thing. So that one is definitely really cringy for me. I'm like, please don't do that.
Please don't do that. What about the mattress sales? Is there any liability there? Like somebody gets hurt on the mattress? That's
I've not heard of that one.
Oh, that's like a really big one for some reason. There must be a company that does it, but they bring mattresses into like the gym on a Saturday. And if they sell one or two mattresses, the booster clubs get a pretty nice share of the profit. So probably low on the liability list because it's kind of soft. No.
Yeah. Interesting though.
Well, yeah, Robin, I would add that any time a booster club helps fund something, they organize something, if their name is attached to it in any form or fashion, then they could be drawn into a lawsuit if somebody gets hurt. So in this case, if kids are in there jumping up and down on mattresses, that's a perfect example of how somebody can get hurt and then get drawn into a lawsuit.
See, Elgin, you can tell you have way more experience. You see the problem before I do. So, I'm thinking it's fun. You're like, no, there's liability there.
Yep.
Well, so some clubs run one big event a year and some are going nonstop the whole season. How do they decide between like, okay, we're going to get one day event coverage for this event versus an annual policy?
So our annual policies cost about double what a single event. So it's pretty much a no-brainer. If you have only one event all year, you're not having any other meetings, you're not doing anything, you just have one event, then you could go with just having a single event. But if you have two events, it makes a lot more sense to have an annual policy. And what we find is that usually, even if an organization thinks they're only having one event, they might be meeting to do planning. And so if they're meeting at the school or meeting at a place where someone falls down or something, there's liability in places that you wouldn't expect. So usually, unless you are 100% sure it is just the one event, just go with an annual policy. It's 50% more. So it's not a huge difference dollar-wise.
So we've talked about like not having insurance versus having insurance. So that's pretty black and white. But like, are there any things that they should look out for if they're maybe not buying insurance from you, that mistakes that they can make if they're going to just a general liability company, or some pitfalls to be aware of?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So we find organizations that have just gone to like State Farm Agency or just, the broker that they use for their homeowners insurance and just said, hey, help me because I don't know what to do. and are paying a lot more money. So we have been doing this since 1989. So it's 37 years this year. And as I mentioned, this is all we do. We have this national program and we have been able to provide, because we have so many organizations nationally, we have been able to provide a really good premium and do it for a lot less than most of any other providers out there. So yeah, I would recommend, if you don't have insurance, I don't know how to really, there's just so much risk. If you don't have insurance and you don't have a budget for it, call us. Just call us. We're not going to try to necessarily sell you, but our mission is around awareness and understanding what could go wrong. And ultimately, if the option is you're not going to buy insurance, we would still like to tell you what you should be looking out for and what are some practices that we would share. We still really think you should have insurance. And if you're buying insurance from someone else, I would suggest a couple of things, which are, you might be overpaying. And in that case, contact us. We're happy to tell you. And if you don't think you're overpaying, I would still encourage you to make sure that the activities that you're doing are actually covered. There can be some limitations, especially our program was designed for booster clubs, PTAs. So we have tried to make sure that we're not leaving out any of these frequent occurrences where you might find exclusions under other policies where it just was never really a consideration. But we're happy to help if you have another policy or you don't, and you have some questions about what you should do next.
Yes, as Jamie said, our policy has been crafted to provide the coverage that these organizations need. And one of the biggie is, we talked about everybody can be held liable. Well, if you go to a local insurance agent and they sell you a general liability policy, the named insured is going to be that, whatever the name of that booster club is. So it's going to, if there's liability, if there's a suit, it's going to defend and protect the booster club, but it's not going to protect all the volunteers and officers. So our policies, the coverage has been extended to protect everybody.
That's a great point. That's exactly the kind of thing that people just don't know, and they assume that the booster club would be all encompassing.
Right.
Well, you guys have been doing this a long time. I'm sure there's some stories. What's kind of the strangest or most surprising claim that's ever come across your desk? You both have really big smiles. Our listeners can't see your smiles, but there's really big smiles here.
Well, one of my favorite stories is, and it's really bizarre, but it's a true story, is that there was an organization, there was a small piece of property in a neighborhood right by the school. Nobody had built a home on the property. It was just sitting vacant for years. And so the organization went to the owner and said, if you would donate this property to the city, we want to take some of our money and develop a nice little playground for the kids in the neighborhood. And that's what happened. And then about 6 months after the playground had been completed, there was a lawsuit filed against the organization. And the basis of the lawsuit was that this playground had become detrimental to the community. And once the attorneys got involved and drilled down into it, what they found out was there's a group of senior citizens that was upset because this playground had created additional noise and was interrupting their naps in the afternoon. So we tell people all the time, people can sue for any reason, and sometimes they do. And so here's a situation where who would have ever thunk, right?
Yeah.
But it happens. Crazy stuff.
Yeah. And I really like the one, sometimes directors and officers insurance is a little bit harder it's less tangible. And so there's a claim that I like to use as an example for when someone might take an issue with your organization's decisions. And we had an organization that had a meeting, and they had this one member that was always very outspoken and tended to get a little bit aggressive. And so they had a meeting on campus, and they asked campus police to attend the meeting just for the safety of everyone in attendance. And sure enough, this person that they knew was going to get a little out of hand did. And they asked the campus police to please escort them away just for the benefit of everybody that was there. And that person sued them for a violation of their civil rights. They had to defend that. So, and that is the type of claim that we're seeing more and more often, where people are just very self-righteous and they feel that they've been wronged personally in some way. And I feel like it's coming up a lot more. And for us, those claims are hard to put a dollar value on. And so a lot of times legal can be very expensive. But yeah, that one was an example of where we thought we agree that this organization made all the right decisions and they still got sued.
This is a silly question, but just to clarify, if an organization does get sued, the insurance would cover the legal defense of that. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
When people ask us why they should buy insurance, that's one of the reasons is even if you didn't do anything wrong, and even if you're not found liable, you should buy a $100 insurance policy to pay all the legal bills to prove you're innocent.
Yeah, that's the real cost, right? Like even if you did everything right, those legal bills can add up really quickly. One thing to every booster club parent or PTO parent before they run their very first fundraiser concession shift, what would it be?
Going back to the question of like, why would anybody sue us? I would just encourage booster clubs to consider their organization the same way that you would consider your home or your auto and the liability that comes along with it. So if, you think about our homes and we have a pool and that could create liability and we want to make sure that nobody gets injured. Well, we should be thinking about our booster clubs the exact same way. And we should be looking around to say that's not safe or how could we make this better? And ultimately, like, what could go wrong here? And I think we tend to think of these organizations as an extension, and there's enough people involved that nobody's ever personally liable, but that's not true. And so I really encourage everybody to consider that, like consider that your own kind of backyard and think about what could go wrong and you can be held liable. So just think about it in those terms.
Yeah, to Jamie's point, most people go, oh, we're going to do this event and we've got a grill to serve hot dogs. How wonderful. And we've got a snow cone machine and we're going to be serving drinks and we're going to be doing all this great stuff. And unfortunately, you have to be a little more pessimistic and say, like Jamie did, what can go? Somebody could get burned on this grill. We need to make it safe. If we spill something on the floor, people could slip and fall down. And we need to make sure that we're just very careful about all that stuff.
Yeah, I know we had kind of one of those worst case scenarios in Texas a couple of years ago where a volunteer was actually killed because the propane tank next to the grill exploded. And so like you think you're just doing good, you're having fun, you're cooking hot dogs, and there's definitely risk with it. And I think you do just get in riskier situations because you're in parking lots, you're in schools, you're in places that are unusual, there's excitement, there's a lot of people. And so it just kind of boosts that factor up a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's just say we're a brand new booster board getting started. They just took over from last year's officers. How do they get started? Do they just call and they can go ahead and get a policy set up? What do renewals look like? Can you give us a little insight on that?
Yeah, it's very simple. They can call us or they can go online, either way, and purchase the insurance. We have lots of information on our website about the different types of insurance and what they cover, but we're also glad sometimes it's easier to understand it when you're talking to a real person. So if you're more comfortable with that, please call us and we can bind coverage or issue coverage. We can sign you up that day and then it goes into effect the following day. If you decide in the middle of the year that there's a coverage you didn't buy and now you need to buy it, we can always add that, prorate the premium. And then we start sending out renewal notices 90 days before the expiration date. We'll send out 90 days, 60 days, 30 days. And then if it expires and you haven't renewed, then we'll get on the phone and try to call you. So we don't want you to go unprotected.
But sometimes you got to figure out who to call, right? Like the volunteer has changed. It's a new person. It's a lot of fun tracking all those booster volunteers, right?
Yeah.
It is.
Well, the last question that we always end our podcast with is, what activities or sports did you do in school and how did that experience impact who you are today?
I'll say, so I was not a sporty person, but I did drama club and it was wonderful. And we had, a support organization, a parent teacher group that helped us raise funds. And our drama club got to go to New York City and see a bunch of Broadway shows. And I love doing that and being a part of that and having that really my mom actually was a chaperone and my teacher was wonderful. And so anyway, just having that connection and getting to do something like that was really big for me. So,
yeah, that was just the opposite. When I was in school, I was a sports person. And back in the old days, most of my friends, we played baseball, basketball, and football. We played all three sports. Nowadays, all the sports seem to overlap each other and kids can't do that. But I played all three sports and it taught me how important a team is. And I think that applies to businesses. I think that applies to booster clubs. I think an invaluable lesson that I learned by participating in sports.
I always think that there's as much education that happens in the extra activities as there is in the schooling itself. So it's a big part of why we do what we do at Booster Hub, is because we really appreciate the value of all these programs, and then also the parents that put all the time and effort into making them happen, right?
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Well, Jamie and Elgin, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to put AIM Insurance link in the notes of the podcast so everyone can find how to contact you. Any other information that you'd like to share with the listeners?
As a parting comment, I'd just like to, I talked a little bit about AIM, but, we are a small agency. This is all we do. We have an entire team that's dedicated to answering questions. We understand that all of the organizations that we support are running small businesses with a set of volunteers that turn over regularly. And it is truly mind-blowing. Like, if you had told me before I knew that this was a thing that was going to go off without a hitch, I would have never believed it. But it does. And there's thousands of organizations across the United States doing it. And so we are here to support those organizations. And that's really our mission. So like I said, we don't have a phone tree, and we try to be the best support we can in order to kind of back our mission to protect good people that are doing good things. So whether you purchase insurance or not, we would be happy to be some type of support to you. So we appreciate what all of these organizations are doing. It's amazing.
I love that. Well, thank you. And I'm sure we'll be talking again and maybe even have a webinar here soon.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you, Robin.
Yeah, thank you, Robin.
The Boosted Volunteer is brought to you by Booster Hub. To find out more about Booster Hub and how our app can help you improve communications, increase engagement, raise more money, and manage your booster club responsibly, visit www.boosterhub.com. And then make sure to search for Booster Club Podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Booster Hub, thanks for listening.